My friends, my next project is all the way from Switzerland, and I'll tell you all about it right after this. Hello my friends, Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa String Works workshop, and we are with a mandolin that came all the way across the pond from Switzerland. It's a Loar, the Loar, not to be confused with a Gibson Lloyd Loar, a little different. They just play off of that name. You know, I've got this tuned up and it's in for a setup basically. So I thought the first thing I would do would just be to evaluate it on camera here. So let me just play it a little bit here and tell you what I'm looking for as I'm evaluating an instrument in terms of what it's going to need. First of all, when I hit the chord, it sounds a little bit hollow, and I hear a little bit of tinniness. It's got a lot of depth of tone, don't get me wrong. What I'm referring to is not the tone of the instrument. The tinniness I'm talking about is I'm hearing some little rattling like kind of metallic type sounds, thin, some stuff that could go away. I can tell this mandolin can sound really good because it does have some real good depth of tone. And so I think my suspicion is some of that, noise is coming from, possibly even from this tail where the frets are out over here, because the strings are, fairly low, and when you press them down, they get lower, of course. But quite honestly, it's going to sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. The next thing I want to say is that the action's not that great. It could be lower, but, it's hard to explain all these things. It just really does have a difficult action. It's not as low as it could be. There's a little bit of underbow in this area that needs to be taken out with the tightening of the truss rod. And just to be clear, that doesn't change your neck angle at all. All that does, I'm exaggerating, but there's like a bowl right here. It's a very small bowl. It's just barely even noticeable. But on a mandolin, if you can see it with your eye, you probably have too much. So I'm 99% sure we have too much. So there's the next problem that we have to address. For my money, I would take these frets out right here and scallop this down. Now here's why. Look how tiny amount of pick I have exposed. When I play, get the camera to focus there. When I play, I barely have any pick exposed at all. But yet, listen to this. You can hear it. Even with just that tiny amount exposed, you hit that. As you're picking, you actually hit this extension. Why do they put it on there? Because it's traditional. It's been done since Lloyd Loar did it on those early Gibsons. Or actually, I think Orville Gibson may have done some of that. I really don't know all the history on it, and I don't claim to be. You don't have to correct me. The point is, it's been done since the 20s for sure, because Lloyd Loar perfected the F-style mandolin, and it's always been there. So for at least 100 years now, it's been there. So the point is that most people nowadays pull these frets out because they're primarily just decoration, and they scallop it down to give more pick clearance. So I'm probably going to do that on this mandolin too, assuming the customer agrees to it. That's the next thing. So, if you're keeping track here, I'm finding quite a few things I would do differently. The next thing is, for me, I don't have much clearance here with my hand. I always have my hand really close to the bridge. I don't necessarily lay on the bridge, but I kind of rub across there a lot. And I'm noticing how sharp these edges are on this saddle. Now, it's got, there's nothing wrong with an ebony saddle on a mandolin, nothing wrong with that. But I really think because of the depth of tone of this mandolin, you could get a whole lot more volume with an antler saddle, so I'll probably put an antler saddle on this also, again, if the customer agrees. But in any case, we're going to definitely round off these edges where they're not so sharp and grabbing your hands. Now, moving up here, I don't feel it too much up here. I also round off these, the nut, so that the nut doesn't grab your hand up here when you're coming up like this, sliding up here. It's a little bit grabby, but not very bad. But I will probably touch that up a little bit also. So the action itself is a little bit high, but not terrible. But yeah, we'll even lower the action. And I guess that's about it. I don't really see anything else off the top of my head that needs to be done, other than, of course, we'll make sure we've got the intonation perfect and all those other normal setup things. We'll level all the frets, recrown them all. We'll do the full meal deal. But I just wanted to point out the things that I absolutely know we need to fix. And probably the main one is this underbow right in here, which isn't terrible, but there is more than it needs. And for me, the next main thing would be to scallop this out. I think those would be the two biggest changes I would make to this mandolin. And of course, there's all kinds of little detail-y stuff that we do as we're going into it. I hope all that makes sense to you, and I didn't sound like I was talking out of both sides of my mouth too much. But that is the thing about setting up an instrument. There's a fine line, you know, and you can be on either side of that fine line, but you need to be really close to that fine line. You go one way or the other too far, and it's what they call the point of diminishing return. And that's what you're always fighting on setting up an instrument, is trying to get to that fine line. So come along as we find that fine line on this mandolin. Well, my friends, first thing I want to do with this mandolin is give you a before so that you can hear it before, and then hopefully Emery can put this along with the after later, and you can hear the difference. I feel like there's going to be a huge difference in this. Even if you can't hear it, for sure there will be a huge difference in the way it feels and the way it plays. Trust me, I wish you could feel that difference, because that's where the big difference is going to be when I'm finished. But I really think it will make a big difference in the sound as well. So I'm going to play the same tune. I'm going to play Right On by Bill Monroe. I play it out of the key of F, and the reason I like to play that tune as my demo tune for these kinds of things is because I go across all the strings, and that way you can kind of hear it all, you know. And I'll tell you what, I'm having trouble playing it. I really am, because of this, how close this tail is to the strings. I really am struggling with that. So it's probably not going to sound real great on this before sound. I hope you can hear that tick, 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 because every time my pick goes in there, I'm hitting that like that. Before I started scalloping those down, I played them this way also, and I never really noticed it that much. But you sure do notice them after you've been playing one that is scalloped. Playing them without the scallop is really hard to do now. Now, of course, these strings are pretty low at this end, and they're pretty low at this end, but they're a little bit high in the middle here, like I said. So we might as well get started so that you can hear that big difference. I've loosened all the strings. Now the first thing I want to do after loosening the strings is to take the bridge out. And what I always do, or at least usually do, is to mark underneath here in this low spot, I'll mark T for treble and B for bass. That's how I do it. That means that way I won't turn it around and get it on there backwards when I put it back on later. I don't care where it was located. That's not an issue. I'm going to locate it precisely when I set the intonation. But anyway, I just wanted to mark that. That way it'll fit the top better, or at least it'll fit it as well as it did before. Okay, so then once I got the strings loose like this, all I do is just cut them off because I'm not going to reuse them, and it just saves lots of time. Then, you know, a lot of people will frown on this technique, but the truth is it saves you a lot of time as a luthier, which it also saves the customer money by just grabbing 2 of them at a time like that and unwinding them and pulling them right out. And you might say, oh, you're going to scratch something up. Well, it's not going to scratch anything. I mean, it's no different than taking 1 at a time. You just do 2 at a time. So it just saves you all kinds of time and just makes it much faster. The reason I coil them up is because they will walk out of any container you put them in unless you coil them up. So I always coil them up before I put them in a container. And this one here is locked in a little bit different, so it's not gonna just pull off, unfortunately. There it is. Now I got it out. And then again, just coil all of them up. And that'll keep them in the container rather than having them walk out, which they will do if you don't coil them up. Down at this end, this piece of felt was in here and there was nothing on this. So that's going to be the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to attach a piece of felt permanently here and permanently here, and that will keep the strings in between there and there won't be any rattling or extra noise. Okay, it doesn't take much of this felt, but you just want to go, I put it right across about where these 2 large bulbs are on the ends. Those round parts there, that's about where I usually put it. And I just, you know, it doesn't have to be real precise. You just cut it off like that. And then you peel and stick. I think you can get this peel and stick felt in either craft stores or like Walmart in the sewing area or someplace like that. You can find it. I don't know exactly the best place to find it, but it's just a peel and stick type felt. And that'll take care of this piece. And when you put it down like that, you can't see it. There, I can see it a little bit right there, so I will just snip that off. That way you can't see it when you put it on there. And basically I'll do the same thing here, and I just put it on this, I put it on this elevated piece where it comes up like that. That'll work just fine. So now I'm just cutting it to length. This way it's a one-time thing. You don't have to fix it every single time you change your strings, which, you know, if you have a piece of felt like this, every time it'll fall out, you know, and this way it's there permanently. You don't have to worry about it. Okay, so now we're done with that, so we won't monkey with that anymore right now, and you can see how it goes away. You can't tell it's there. But the strings will be cradled in between there when we're ready to put them back on. Since this is all the way from Switzerland, I'm going to give it the best setup I could possibly give it, because I sure don't want any problems from that far of a distance. So I think the first thing I'm going to do, now this has kind of the in-between frets. These are not the very biggest frets. These are kind of middle-sized. They're bigger than what I typically use. I don't think these are that bad. For my money, I'd probably just stick with these frets. But I better check with the customer to see if he wanted those smaller frets put in there, because I don't recall what he said. And he may really want that, and I better double check it. Okay, so while I'm waiting on the customer to get back to me about keeping these frets as is and, you know, letting me take this out so I can scallop it, you know, I want his approval before I do all that. But I don't really need his approval to flatten out this fingerboard, so I think I'll get started on that, because it has definitely got too much curve to set it up well. Well, that's a long screw for a truss rod cover. I don't recall seeing one any longer than that. Surely this one can't be that long, because it goes right over the truss rod. But it is. That's amazing. Oh, I see, because the truss rod's way back in there. This goes right down in front of the truss rod. Oh my goodness, here we go. It looks like this is going to take a Allen type adjustment and go back in there. I'm going to see if I can get in there with something like this. I don't know what size it takes yet. I kind of think it's going to be around a 4mm, but I haven't found a 4mm yet. Here we go, this is my 4mm. Let's see if it'll go in there. I'm going to have to get a regular wrench because that's not going to work. So I'm going to have to find the right wrench that's going to go in there. Well, it took me a little while to figure out which one fits it, but I think I've got a good tight fit on this wrench. So I'm going to tighten it that way. I'm going to look down it as I tighten it to make sure I'm not going past where I want to be. It looks like that's still got an underbow, so I'm going to try a little. Oh, you know what? I think this is a two-way truss rod, and I think it was tightened the wrong way. I seriously believe that's what the problem is. Well, maybe not. Yeah, I think so, because I think I've got to the place where it's really loose. Yep, it's really loose. So I got to get it tightened back up, I think, now. Yep, now it's starting to tighten. There's again, that's why I hate two-way truss rods. They absolutely suck. And when I say suck, I'm talking canal water. They suck. They absolutely are the worst thing that was ever put on an instrument, ever. I am not exaggerating when I tell you 8 out of 10, and I mean 8 out of 10. Every one of them that comes in here, almost all of them seem to me like, I'm being kind when I say out of 10, are adjusted the wrong way. And that's what puts the underbow in the neck. And you don't want that underbow in a mandolin neck. That's looking pretty good now. I knew there was something wrong there. Boy, they're two-way truss rods. They're the worst thing that was ever created for an instrument, and I'm not kidding. Yeah, that looks way better. Way better. Like night and day better already. I'm just going to go with that. I really didn't tighten it all that much. I just basically snugged it up. That looks real good right there. I'm going to go with that. We can always go tighter. That is amazing. I have said that before on the channel. I hope you all remember me saying that. But I'm telling you for sure, 8 out of 10 of them are turned the wrong way. I don't know why that is. It just is a fact. Okay, so let's put it all back together here, and we'll move on. Well, my friends, I heard back from Daniel, the customer, and he said that he trusts my judgment and do whatever I think it needs. Well, I'll be honest with you, I truly am on the fence about these frets. I'm not happy with these larger frets, but on the other hand, these are not the giant frets that I see a lot. So these are kind of in between. I'm almost okay with those, so I think I'm just going to file them and recrown them and all that. I don't think that's going to be much of an issue, but I am going to jerk all these frets out. I'll leave the last full fret, and the rest of them are coming out because they're just decoration anyway. And it'll give us some pick clearance because we desperately need pick clearance on this instrument. So I'm not too worried about these tearing out because I'm just going to, grind this down anyway, and so there's no point in worrying about chip out or anything like that. Incidentally, I'm not sure how much I covered on the two-way truss rod so far in this video series because another day has dawned here, and I did do a rant this morning, though, in my daily vlog. Today is Tuesday, October 18th, and if you'll look at vlog number 130, you'll see that this mandolin is featured, and I'm talking about the two-way truss rod in that vlog. And it's quite a rant, and you may want to check that out as well. Now, just so you see, pulling them out dry like that, and of course I didn't take any extra care, but look how it chipped out, and really chipped out badly. But that's not an issue, like I said, because we're going to scallop this down. But my point in pointing that out is, had I wet that down, that wouldn't have chipped nearly that bad. I mean, it still would have chipped some, don't get me wrong, but it wouldn't have chipped even half that bad. Okay, so I'll set up to scallop that out and show you what that looks like. Most of these sanding drums are a little bit out of balance and everything, so I always turn the RPMs down. I'm down to like 15,000. And I can always turn it up. I'll just point out that if you attempt to do this scalloping, you really want to watch the edge along here and the edge along here, that you're not getting one side thinner than the other side. You also want to make sure you're not dipping out, so you can watch that white, and that will help you tell if you're doing it straight. And then probably this second most important thing is don't let it run over the back of this, or you'll grind this plastic off just that fast. So don't, you know, you'd be surprised how quick it'll grab and go down there. So be real careful with this end right here. And then the final third thing to really watch for is that you don't hit this fret with your sander. So, you know, you just have to pay attention and take your time, and it can be done. Not that difficult, actually. And as I said, you want to stop and take a look at it. We got plenty of meat there left, so I'm not hurting on that. I always try to take these down until these lines disappear, but on some mandolins, you'll make this so thin around here that you just really have to stop. So I go down to where I'm comfortable, wherever that is, and then if the lines are still not gone, then I'll just fill the lines and dye them. That's the only thing you can do. And it does vary from instrument to instrument. I always stop and do the vacuuming thing. It's just nice to keep it clean, so you just feel better about what you're doing, that you don't, you know, have something covered up that you can't see. So it's just a good practice to keep it clean as you're doing this. Now, I've mentioned several important ideas, but probably the most important idea is you can't undo any of this. So if you screw it up, you have screwed it up. You know, there's no second chance. The only way you can fix it, really, if you screw it up, is to build a whole new fretboard with all new binding. And I don't plan to go there, so that's why I take my time on this. It looks like I'm about to hit the bottom of the groove, and that's a really good thing. I like to see that early. We still got plenty of meat left, and the grooves are almost gone. I try to take all the grooves down even, so that, like, these right now are much deeper than these are. So I'm going to concentrate back here and try to even them all up. All right, I think I'm going to quit right there because it's so close to being completely gone, and I don't want to make a mistake because we're getting very thin. So you're always better off to quit ahead of time and then do some other method to get it down to the final. I'm going to go ahead and vacuum that up. Okay, so what other method could I use? Well, I can do several things. I can use a single edge razor blade as a scraper, and I may try that first. Sometimes these things work great, depends on the grain of the wood, depends on a lot of factors. You know, sometimes the plastic binding scrapes good, sometimes it don't. But to me, this is probably the safest way to go if you know how to use a scraper. And you can turn it. The thing about it is that it levels really well. Now, you could sand this too, and I probably will sand it too. But typically the scraper's a little faster. You can see how much stuff it's taken off there. It takes longer to get that much off with sandpaper. There's still one line right there I don't like, but it looks real even all the way around. Very thin now, but it looks real even. See how thin it is? But it looks real even all the way around. So I think I am going to go to sandpaper now. Okay, I've got some 220 sandpaper, and I have it on this rubber holder. I don't even know what you call these things. And you can turn this different directions. Like right now I'm turning it long ways so that I can make sure it's flat across here. And then you can turn it at an angle, which also accomplishes kind of the same thing. It makes it flat and gets out any grooves and things that we have in there. And then up here, I'm going to, I think this will match the radius. And right there at that radius, there's still a little line. And I'm going to try to get that line out. I don't know if it's going to come out entirely or not. So you can see there, it's got it all out except for that one little line. And I'm going to try to get that out too. I'll go to a smaller radius and see if it'll let me get rid of that. I'm trying to make sure I don't create a little ditch here. That's hard. It's really hard. You're right on that bleeding edge of making it really perfect and screwing it up. Well, quite honestly, it's still there. I wish it wasn't. Might try another tactic. I don't know if this blade's sharp enough, but I might be able to get in there with this blade and scrape just that section. Rounded X-Acto blade is what I'm looking for here. May have to find a different one. May have to sharpen it up to get it sharp enough to scrape on this ebony. It's just about the exact radius that you need, but that's almost bad because it needs to be a little tighter radius. You can do more detail with it. This radius really fits it almost like a glove right now, but it would be better if the radius was actually a little tighter. And this one's already been ground a little bit, so I think I'll use this one, sharpen it up, grind it off a little bit, and make it work for this. I think it'll be my best option. Well, I've given it a good try here on sharpening this. I blunted it up quite a bit so it fits the radius a little. It's a little tighter than the radius. And that seems to be working. That's pretty darn good. It can probably be a hair better yet, but you know, I'm not going to go much further than that. I'll probably do a little bit more off camera, but it's just about as good as it gets. Just need a little tiny bit more sanding. The problem is you have to almost sand it across the grain, which is not the best way to sand ebony for sure. I think I'll call that good enough right there. Yeah, I'd even go so far as to say that's just about perfect. You couldn't get it much better than that. Look how even it is around the edges there. It's nice and scalloped. That gets it all the way down where your pick isn't going to hit this, but yet you still have the look of this. So I'm real happy with that. The next thing we're going to do is level and recrown all the frets. And there's no time like the present. I have already flattened out this fingerboard to where it looks flat to my eye. And, you know, I don't feel any rocking. So I think we're good. I'm just going to lightly recrown all these frets, or level them and recrown them. This first fret seems high to me. It feels like it's grabbing. I'm not worried at all about filing too much on these frets. In fact, I think that's a good thing because it'll lower them just a little bit, and you know, they're just easier to play. It doesn't look like I've hit this fret yet right here. That's a lot better. That's a lot better. That'll make it easier to play right there. Just that little bit of difference. You'd be surprised how that makes a difference. I believe we're level everywhere. This fret here still looks like it might not have been touched right there. It's real close, but boy, if it has been touched, it's very minimal. So I'm going to go a little more. That feels real good. I believe I've hit everything now. I can see some filing on this one, although I gotta be honest, it's still not that much. I mean, this one's filed a lot, this one's filed a lot, and this one barely, if anything, is even touching. That's why I tell you, no matter how good you are at putting frets in or what kind of machine you use, you'll never get them driven in perfectly level. Perfectly level means within 1/1000th of an inch of each one. Like this one here has barely been touched. I can see now that I am touching it now for sure, you know, and the rest of these have been filed a lot. So you can imagine there how that couldn't play well. So it was definitely worth doing. And I think we're at the end of that process now, so we'll move on to the recrowning phase. Well, for you it's probably just been a second, but for me it's been a couple of days. I haven't been able to do any more on this. The last thing I did, I believe, was level these off. And one fret right about in here was much lower than the rest. And so, you know, again, being a brand new mandolin, you wouldn't expect that, but that just goes to prove what I've always said. You always have to file the frets, even on a brand new instrument, even on brand new frets that are just driven in. I'm just going to make sure I've got it where I want it before I start recrowning. In fact, I think what I'm going to do, I don't ordinarily do this, but in this particular case, because I still think this one fret could be a little low. Now, I can see it's being filed now. I'm probably okay. I'll just put it on this one here and that one there, and maybe this one. This one I can tell is being filed for sure. I think that's got it. And from my perspective, filing these off a lot is actually good because it lowers them down. They were just real tall, and you know, lowering them down is just not a bad thing in my opinion. So now I'll find the recrowning file, and we'll see what we can do with that. This is the really small one, and I think it's a little too small for these frets, so I'm going to go with the next size up. I think what people miss on my recrowning is that I don't do it like I would see most people doing it. Most people put it straight up and down and run straight over the fret like this. I rarely do that. In fact, I barely ever do that. What I'm doing is, and I'm exaggerating it now for the camera, but I'm exaggerating. I'm turning it sideways, then I turn it sideways, and I turn it sideways, and I turn it sideways. I don't want to knock the top down. I only want to knock the corners off and get it semi-round. It doesn't even have to be perfectly round. You know, it just needs to be not sharp on the corners. So that's what I'm doing. It may look like I'm just filing them like regular, you know, straight up and down, but that's not what I'm doing. I barely take anything off the top, if anything. In fact, I'm trying not to take anything off the top because that's what messes with your level. You don't want to mess with your level. And that's why I find using a bigger file than the fret is better. And people have said to me before, well, you're messing up by using that big file. But when you rock it like this, that big file cuts those corners off better than a small file will. And you have to use the appropriate size, of course, for the appropriate fret. This is kind of like medium guitar fret wire, and these are almost that big. When you use the file the way I'm telling you to use it, you can feel it cutting that corner right off. It'll work much faster for you also. If you just keep it straight on the top, it will eventually cut those corners off, but it takes longer. When you direct it directly at the corner, it cuts it off much faster. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to give it another visual here to make sure I didn't miss a sharp corner somewhere. Looks pretty good. Now I'm going to go to the ends and I'm going to actually round these ends off. You'd be surprised what this does to these ends. It really makes them a lot better when you knock these ends down like this. Now the problem is when you get up to the scroll area, you really got to either be careful or you just have to forget it because you'll hit the scroll and make a mess. So it's really tedious when you get up here. That's really a sharp one there. It won't even go, it's so sharp. There you go. Not that you're going to be playing down there much, but it's just nice not to have any sharpness. And now I'll do the same thing on this side. Because this is basically a new fretboard again, and there's really no finger wear to speak of on the actual fretboard, I'm going to use these covers again to sand these. Ordinarily, I don't worry about that. I just sand the whole thing, and I like to sand it this way, honestly, because it really rounds the frets better when you're sanding this way. It knocks all sharp corners off better, believe it or not, whether you think so or not. And it does not leave grooves in the frets like so many people try to tell me it does. This is 800 grit. I use 600 most of the time, and trust me, you're not going to feel any grooves in there with 600 grit, and especially with 800. But I'm going to do these this way just to save time and money for the customer, because there's no reason to level the fretboard itself, since the fretboard hasn't got any wear in it, and therefore filing them this way will save time, or sanding them this way will save time. And again, I'm still rocking from one side to the other, mostly trying to concentrate on rounding the fret more, not taking so much off the top, even though I am trying to smooth the top. You know, after recrowning them, it leaves a lot of marks in the fret, and you don't want to leave the marks. You want to try to get it where it's pretty much smooth. Like I said, the fastest way is to do it this way, and you'll get it done much faster. But then you do need to scrape the fingerboard and make it clean. And on this one, since the fingerboard is already clean, I don't see any reason to do that. This cover is flexible enough that it actually forces down below the fret. And I'm still working on both sides of the fret, believe it or not. It may not look like you could do that, but you can with this, because this cover is so flexible. One of my wonderful YouTube viewers sent me these covers from, I believe, over in Europe. I believe that's where the viewer was from. And I just don't remember. I'm so sorry. But thank you for that if you're watching. I quite often don't use the covers, but in a case where the fretboard is in really good shape, it seems like the way to go. Okay, that seems like a nice job. Trying to think if I'm ready yet. I think I'm going to go ahead and put some oil on there. And, you know, I'm using the Be Good oil. You know, quite honestly, when this is gone, I'll probably just go back to my linseed oil, because I do like the linseed oil really well too. Well, I guess I'll just smear it with my hand first. Rub it in real good. Just, you know, give it its best opportunity to soak up the oil. Pretty much, you just wipe it right back off. Now that should be a really nice fret job there now, so that the frets should all be nice and level. They're nice and round again. And, you know, it should be able to set the action down now and really get it to play well. I think I'll move on to the next step. The thing I'm about to show you is relatively common on a lot of mandolins. I was looking down this with my eyes, and it appeared to me that this side, the treble side of the fretboard, you know, was angled up a little bit. In other words, this side would be higher than this side. So I thought, well, I'm just going to take the calipers here and kind of measure that, and just to see, and try to measure it equally here. So 648 on that side, and let's see what this side measures. 625. So there's a significant difference, and I'll measure it again just to make sure I didn't, you know, turn this crooked or something. Well, now I'm getting 654, which is even higher, but let me check it again. 650, so 648, 650, that's 2 thousandths, that's close enough. and 612 that time, which is even lower. 627, 625, that's pretty close. So the bottom line is, whether those numbers are exactly right or not, you can tell it's significantly higher here than it is here. So, you know, that's not all that uncommon, believe it or not. You'd be surprised how often that happens on instruments. I'm not exactly sure why they're that way a lot of times. I don't know. Really, you'd think by the fact that they do most everything on a machine that everything would be fairly square and fairly level, but it's not sometimes. And when I looked down this, I thought, well, that does look like that's crooked, and sure enough it is. This side of the fretboard is higher than this side of the fretboard. Again, you know, I hate to point these things out because then the customer gets all uptight about it and he thinks he's got a defective instrument. And the truth is, it's really common. It's not uncommon at all. So check your instrument and see if you think you have that same issue. Once you're playing it and stuff, you don't even notice it. You really don't. You know, it just is what it is. And I just pointed out just as a point of reference for all the viewers out there. So here we go with the setup. Well, I was debating on which strings I was going to put on this, and I've decided to go with the LS 250s made by GHS. I sell them on my website. These always give an instrument a little bit more woody sound, and I don't think this mandolin necessarily absolutely needs that, but on the other hand, woody never hurts, you know, and I think this will make this mandolin sound really good. So anyway, that's what we're going to go with, and so I'll start putting the strings on here. I've shown my string technique so many times, but it never hurts to show it again because there's always new viewers. On the bass side here, I use this technique. I go, you know, I put the string in place, I go up and wrap it around the post from the inside around like that. And I go ahead and I wrap it around at least once and a half, at least that much. Depends how much post is sticking out. There's not much post sticking out here, so I'm only going to go 1.5 on this because I can barely get to the hole. And then I'm going to poke this back through. And then the thing about that is you want to make sure you keep this end of the string above the wraps you've already made. In other words, it goes over the top of the wraps you've already done. Then you just pull it up tight and straight up like that, and essentially you're pretty much done. You've already got your string tight, see? It's already tightening up. I'm going to do the rest of the strings on this side with that technique, and then I'll show you the technique for this side. For the people who watch all my setups, just so you know, I didn't address the feet sitting on here, and the only reason is because the feet are sitting pretty darn well. I don't see really that I could improve it much, so I'm just going to go with the way the feet are on here. If the feet weren't touching this really well, I'd put sandpaper under here and slide this back and forth till it matched even better. But honestly, I think it's matching pretty well. There's still a chance I might put some sandpaper under there. The only reason why, though, is because this bridge is really perpendicular to maybe slightly forward, and I would prefer it be perpendicular to slightly backward. So anyway, I might do that. I may just put the other 2 E strings on here and leave them loose, and then put the sandpaper under there. The pressure of those strings helps the sandpaper work better. So anyway, I think I'm going to do that rather than put all these other strings on, just because of the way that I see the bridge sitting. Okay, so I said I'd show you my technique for putting on the treble side. It's different, and you might say, well, why is it different? Well, it's just simply because these strings are smaller and they don't hold as well with this technique. They will hold with this technique if you wrap it a bunch of times. Because these strings are smaller, here's the safer way to do it. I like to, you don't have to do this, but I like to have my holes kind of going across this way. Even if they're just slightly going across that way, it just makes it easier for my technique. Okay, so I'm hooking it on the tailpiece, and then I go from the inside out through the hole, like that. And I leave, just a curl like that. Not very much, just a little bit. And like so. Then I go back around the outside of the post this direction and go back under the string that I just poked through the hole and pull this up tight like so. and then just lift it straight up so that now it's wrapped around this string right here. And of course it has to come off the tailpiece during the demonstration. But anyway, so now this string is now locked in because this string is wrapped around the end of it. And so it cannot come off. Now the only negative of this technique is that you do more winding. And in the old days, I never bothered to even use a string winder because I was quick. But nowadays, because of the arthritis, I'll use a string winder. And then, you know, what I didn't show you on this side is I always take and pull the string straight up and then just take these straight flat across the top and cut them off right even with the top. All right, I'm going to put the other string on with that same method, and then I'll show you my sandpaper technique. Okay, my technique is to just take a piece of 220 and I'll probably just rock the bridge up on it like that. It's a little tricky sometimes to get it where you want it because of the string tension. But anyway, you try to get the bridge really close to where it's going to live. And the string tension actually helps you in sanding this. And I'm just looking under there. And you know, you're just in the ballpark. You're not absolutely 100% where it's going to go. That's pretty close. So now I rock it sideways. Now everybody else goes forwards and backwards. I hate the forwards and backwards because it rocks the front of the bridge off and it rocks the back of the bridge off, and you're sitting on a rocking chair then. I like to go this way because it keeps it perfectly flat, and you can also put pressure on the back while you're doing it this way, and it will then make the bridge stand up straight but slightly back, and that's what you want because the pressure's always pulling forward as you tighten the strings, and it always wants to pull your bridge and make it lean forward. So I want to stop that lean and move it, do this right now, and you know, I'm just going to do it like this, and it's kind of a slow process, but I'm putting pressure on it to lean it backwards like this. You can, if you even look, you can see that the back of this is where it's cutting, and that's what I want. I want it to cut on the back a little bit more than the front. You know, you don't do this, you don't try to make a huge angle, you just don't want it past vertical. And it presently is already past vertical just slightly. That's why I'm doing this. But honestly, having the string pressure on here is the best way to do this. It takes some practice. It looks simple on video. But when you start to do this, you're going to think, wow, that's hard to do. And it's not easy, but you learn how, you know. And you get a good firm grip on it, and you just go for it. And then you just take a look at it. It's already better. It's at least vertical, if not slightly back already. And that's what I want. Because you know, anytime they're leaning forward, you got a problem. And especially if you don't have the string tension on it yet, because if it's already leaning forward, you got a real problem, because the string tension is going to pull it really hard forward. And you might say, well, why didn't I just turn the bridge around? Wouldn't that have solved the problem? The problem was that I did try that, and the bridge didn't fit as airtight to the top. So you want it airtight to the top. That's even more important in terms of your sound transfer. But you know, it's still you still want it leaning back. You just got to have it leaning back slightly. And you know, please don't hear me say that I'm leaning them way back. That's not it. Just barely leaning back. That looks real good to me. I'm going to stop right there probably. And you can tell by the way that the sandpaper has sanded here that it's pretty much got full coverage just by looking at the sandpaper, see? So you can tell it worked real well. I'm going to go ahead and take it out of there because I just want to wipe it off, clean it up before I do the final here. Just get rid of that stuff. Now the other thing I like to do once I take it out of there, because now these edges are very sharp, very sharp. And you don't really want that either, but then again, you don't go nuts knocking them down. All you do is you get rid of the sharp corner, and kind of like a draw file. In other words, I'm not going this way so much, I'm kind of going at a 45 angle. And you just knock that real sharp corner off, and that's all you want to knock off. And why do you want to knock that off? Because when you need to slide your bridge, if you got a lot of tension on it especially, that sharp edge can cut right into your finish and keep you from sliding it. So this will let it slide right up, on your top of your finish without creating a problem. There's really not much to this after you know the first 1,000 things. After that, it's really simple. And you rub your finger over it, you can tell if it's sharp or not. That's pretty round, but it could probably be just a little bit better. You don't want to, I'm not trying to make them crazy round. If you look at it in the camera, you probably can't even tell I've rounded it. So you just get rid of that sharpness, because it really does feel sharp. It feels almost as sharp, not like a knife, but it's very sharp square edge. Okay, now we'll put it back on here. By the way, I had previously marked bass and treble, so I knew which way I wanted this to go. And of course, for those of you who might just be tuning in for the first time, you might be wondering what kind of saddle this is. That's the deer antler saddle. I make those and sell those. I have sold literally, I would almost say tens of thousands at this point, but for sure thousands. I can tell that the action up here is going to be really high, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm just going to kind of get myself in the ballpark here for this for right now. And I can tell that these posts on this bridge are tall, and my saddle is, I don't put the through holes through on my saddles typically. I prefer them not to have the through holes. I think they look nicer, plus your hand doesn't grab on that, that hole and or the post sticking through. So these posts seem a little long to me, so what I'm going to do, in fact I think they're quite long, I'm going to make sure they're tight with a little screwdriver, because they have a screw head in the, and I'm just making sure they're tight, snug. I'm not going to, you don't want to twist these in real hard, because you will break something, but you do want to make sure they're bottomed out. That one doesn't seem like it's bottomed out like the other one. I'm just going to knock it in a little bit. And then I'm going to take a file and knock these down. And you might say, well, that's not a good thing, but honestly, I've done it hundreds and hundreds of times. Okay, so how do I go about doing that? Well, honestly, sometimes it's easier than other times. I'm actually, what I think I'm going to do is put the wood down in here and have the jaws sitting on this metal screw. That'll kind of stabilize it, having the thread screwed down to the top of the jaw. And then I can just take a file and file this off. I'm not sure which file I'm going to use. I actually think I'm going to go back to my little mill bastard file, because these are brass, and I'll just file that off with that. That was a really deep screw head in there, a real deep groove. I filed out most of the groove, but there's enough there that you could put a screwdriver on it if you still wanted to. Let me check and see if it's still bottoming out or if it's going all the way down. It feels like it's going all the way down now, and I think that's going to be fine. I'll just do the same technique to the other side. The screw groove on this, or the screwdriver groove, is very deep, so you can file a lot of this off and still have a screwdriver groove left. I think I'll just stop right there. I believe that's going to be good enough, and it will allow this to work better. Lining up my base with my base, and making sure that that's the right way. And now I'm going to put the threads all the way down and see if this thing bottoms out. Quite honestly, it doesn't quite. Yeah, maybe it does. It's close enough. I think we're good enough now. I think we'll be fine. And if not, we'll do it again. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of the strings on this, and then I'll show you my next technique that we do for setting this up. All right, I'm just working to get the string height now in the ballpark. I'm not trying to get it to the final yet. I just don't want it to be crazy low, and it was pretty darn low. It's probably can still go up just a little bit. And because when you get the tension on it, it'll pull it down even more. So without the tension on it, I don't really want it lifting the strings because it'll be too low when I'm done. I'm just looking to see if you can tell a difference from the height of this saddle. I would say it probably is a teeny bit higher on this side because of the curved neck, but it's very minimal. You can barely tell that. Now I'm going to go up here. Well, tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set the intonation, get it up to tension on everything before I actually set the action up here. It's not looking quite as bad as I thought it was. I thought it was going to be really high. I think it's still a little high, but anyway, let's go ahead and set the intonation and get the action going. So I think what I'll do is I'll just start on one string here and get it up close. I'm not necessarily going to take it to full pitch yet, but let's see, E, F, G, so let's just go to F. And then I'm just going to test it real flat. So that means this is too far back. So I need to move it forward about right there. And we'll test it again. Bring it up to pitch. That's F. That's almost dead on right there. So I'm going to call that good enough for now. May not be good enough for the final, but it's good enough for now. I'm just going to bring this up to a D right now. Pretty close. It's pretty close. It's close enough for the moment. All right, I'm going to go ahead and tune it up. And I'll bring you back here in just a minute when I get her tuned up. I thought of just another tip, and I know most of you know this, but there's always new people. So the thing you want to know about when you're tuning up is any instrument really, but especially a mandolin, because there's so much tension and so many strings, is don't try to take like this setup to full pitch, this setup to full pitch, this one. In other words, take this one up a little bit, this one up a little bit, this one up a little bit, this one up a little bit. Do it again, do it again, do it again until you finally get up to full pitch. It kind of keeps the even pressure on your instrument. It's just a good practice. Can you do it the other way? Yeah, you can. But this is just a good practice. See, you can do it really fast too. You don't have to spin. In fact, it may actually be quicker to do it that way, because if you bring this side all the way up and then you work your way across, by the time you get all the way up there, you're going to be way low over here anyway. All right, this might be my last time through here. We'll go to try it again. You always want to tune up to the note. If you tune past it, go back below it and then go back up to the note, and you might be wondering why that is. There's backlash in the keys. If you tune down to a note, any note, you're going to think your tuning keys are slipping. That's why most people say, my tuning keys are slipping. They're tuning down to the note. You always and only tune up to the note. Never down. If you go past it, go back below it, and then go back up to it. That gets rid of all backlash, and you won't have any trouble with your tuning keys. I'm not going to play it yet. I'm just checking things right now. So this is in the early stages. First thing I always check is see if the bridge is sitting up straight or if it's leaning forward, and it's actually leaning forward a little bit. They almost all do, and that's why you want to not have it leaning forward without tension. That's pretty straight. I can straighten these things up by hand like that. If you can't do that, then you want to make sure that you got your angle a little bit more. This one is just on the edge. It could probably use a little more angle, quite honestly, and I might do that before I'm done. Just checking the tuning again. I want to get it up to close to full pitch. And now I'm going to find my thin Martin pick. That's what I use. It's about a 17, 18 thousandths pick. And in fact, let's just check it again. I mean, I've checked it before. I just can't remember. It's measuring right at 17 and a half thousandths. Now, I use just this one pick for all of my crosshair. And you might say, well, 17 thousandths is too high. Well, I didn't say I'm setting it at 17 thousand. I'm using a 17 thousandths pick as my adjuster. And so what I do is I slide it in here. Now on my G strings, that's just about where I want it. I want it about 17 thousandths, maybe a tight 17 thousandths, which would put it closer to 15. But right now it's real loose. So I don't want it loose. I know these strings are 40, so I've got a 42 file here. I always use a bigger file than the strings. Even if it's 5 thousandths, even 10 thousandths bigger, I would rather have that than even 1 thousandths under. You don't want your grooves smaller than your string, ever. It's not a good thing. It causes them to pinch, catch, and cause you all kinds of issues. All right, so here's where it gets tedious. This is why I say don't make a new nut unless you have to, because this is where all the time is working this nut down. All right, so the thing you want to do is get an angle that matches your peg head, and you want to keep that angle consistent. If you have a file that is the exact same size as your string, then rock your file a little bit to give it some room to breathe. You don't want it pinched tight. I always do this very cautiously, very slowly. You want to sneak up on it, because if you go too far, you got to make a new nut, and man, that takes a lot of time. You don't want to screw up and do that. Okay, I can tell I'm still high. The thing that you have to be cautious about is that when you're filing these grooves, the old groove could have been pinched, and just a little bit of filing with a larger file will make the string drop way down because it was pinched up high. And so you got to be very careful about that. I can tell this is not the case here. These are not filed deep enough to pinch the strings much. But I'm still going to make it very slow and cautious on setting this up, because I don't want to get it too low. Basically, I want it where the 17th fits in there just snug. In other words, it almost lifts the string, but maybe not quite lifts the string. Now that's on the G. On the D, it'll actually lift the string a little bit on the D. On the A, it'll lift it a little bit more, and on the E, it'll lift it just a teeny bit more. And I just use this one pick as my gauge. I think we're getting really close. I'm going to tighten it back up to pretty close to full pitch. Yep, that's it. Actually, quite honestly, it's lifting it a little bit more than I was hoping. It might buzz. Yep, I kind of went a little bit far there. I'll be honest, I did. That's what you got to be careful of. I should have been taking it up to full pitch each time I checked it. And because I didn't, I'm paying the price here. This is actually a little tight. I have a way to fix that, and we'll fix it here in a minute, but right now it's just on the edge of tight. I'm not going to make that mistake on the rest of them, I'll tell you that. But I'll still be able to work with that and fix it. It won't be a problem. Because I know tricks. It's not bad enough to have to make a new nut, but it's close. Problem is, I'll have to take this string down to almost the same place. Okay, I think that's going to be in the ballpark where they're both working there. Okay, and no, I'm not going to fill the crack. I'm not going to fill the groove with something, so if that's what you're thinking, that's not what I do. Alright, so now I'm going to be a little more careful on these other ones. Actually, the D is pretty dang close. It can use just a tiny bit of filing. Okay, so we're going to take the D and we're only going to just kind of touch it a little bit, just to drop it just a hair and make sure the groove is properly filed. That's really all we're doing on this one. We're not trying to drop it really much. It still just could go down a hair. I'm trying to get the perfect setup on this because it's coming from Switzerland and I don't want it to be high. But as I tell you, there's a point of diminishing return. You get it too low and then you got problems. Almost got it too low on the G, but I think we can salvage it without any issue. I think that's good. And actually, the other string's better. The other string was already lower than this string was, so the other D is okay. They're both at the same height now. The top D was higher than the other one, so it's pretty good now. I think we're fine there. I'm going to go to the A strings. The A strings are pretty loose, the A and the E's. So we're going to do the same thing to these. Again, I'm using a file that's bigger than the A string. And again, you got to be careful because it could have been pinched, held up in the air. So that first filing, I don't do much there because I don't want to get surprised. Just want to get it in the ballpark there and check it again. It's still real loose. Yeah, this is a tedious process. It takes time, but if you really want it right, it just takes that much time. That's all there is to it. If you get in a hurry and try to file too much, you will pay for it in the long run. It's real close now. I want it just a little bit better than that. That's just about right. It's just lifting the string just a teeny bit, and that's perfect. Now we'll do the other A string. Just loosening it up enough to get it out of the slot. And again, the first filing, I'm very conservative with the first filing I do here. Just making sure the slot is straight and at the right angle. That's all I do on the first one. Okay, that one's still a little high. I think that'll work. That's the A. Barely have to press it now to get it to go down. Now the E's really high still, so we'll work on the E. And we'll do the same thing. So I'm not going to show the E because I'm doing exactly the same thing. But I will show you what I do to make this G a little bit better since I got it a hair low. I'll bring you back when I'm ready to do the G. Okay, I've got all the other strings perfect. Like I said, this first G especially, and the second one now a little bit too, because I had to bring them down to the same. They're on the edge of buzzing. They're just a hair too low. And a hair is just a couple thousandths, guys. You're going to think that what I'm doing here is a big deal, and it's not a big deal. Take your fret file, and what you do is you know, I might need to take the D's off also, but probably not. I can probably do it like this. And all you're doing is you're leaning on this first fret a little bit more, but you're filing them all relative to each other. So when you press this one down or whatever, this one will be cleared because they're relatively flat all the way across here. And you're feathering it out. You're taking a little bit more off of this one, a little less here, a little less here, a little less here, a little less, a little less, a little less. And it works out just as well as anything else you'll do, and it saves making a whole new nut, and it saves all that crud, dumping crud in here, which is just crud. So anyway, this is a much better technique, and you don't have to file that much. You'll be surprised, just a little bit is all it takes. That might be enough right there. And it's feathered back because I'm putting a little bit more pressure on the front end here, and more than likely that's enough. Now what I'll do is take the recrowning file, if I can find it, and I just put it back. You know, there it is. I put it back where it's supposed to be, but I just couldn't find it. Anyway, now I'm just going to recrown this just a little bit right here. It quickly feathers out, like right here is the last one. The rest of them you can't even tell. And then again, I'll take the 800 sandpaper, and in this case I'll go ahead and just lay this on here like so. And I'll even lay it upside down because it'll make it easier. And then just redo this, and you'll never be able to even tell that anything was done. It's not like it changed hardly anything. If you don't think this is a good technique, then you just don't understand fret jobs. That's all I can tell you. And it's far better than adding crud to your nut there and, trying to build it up, because that buildup always is softer than the rest of the material and always wears out over time. I'm pretty sure that's going to be all that's required right there, because we didn't need much. We did a minimal amount, and no one can look at this and tell that that even happened. Not even me. Now, I'm going to look at the intonation before I do anything else and see if it's right. The intonation is the single most important step in your setup. It really is, because if it's not right, then nothing's right, period. It just, nothing's right unless this is right. That's a hair sharp. Pull it back just a little bit on that side. Really close. That's right on the money. All right, I'm going to tune her up real good, and then we'll play it for you. One of the things I've noticed off camera while tuning this thing is that these keys are really tight, in my opinion. So I'm going to soak them down with some 3-in-1 oil here. Some of you might say, well, this will make them slip. It will not make them slip. I've done it hundreds upon hundreds of times.
and it's the best thing you can do for them. It keeps your keys from wearing prematurely, for one thing, and the design of the worm gear and the spur gear, it keeps it from it keeps it from slipping, because you're pushing directly against this worm and it can't turn. You can't turn this worm by turning this gear. It's impossible. It just won't work. That's why keys don't slip like people think they do. They just think they slip because they tune down to the note. Very hard to turn. Okay, now I'm going to check the intonation yet one more time, because like I said, that's the most important thing. Seems like it's just a hair flat on the G. Just moving it just a tiny, tiny bit. Right on the money. All right, I keep saying I'm going to tune this up and play it for you, but I had a little problem with my tuner. I pushed the wrong button by accident. I didn't notice I had pushed it, and I had it tuned up higher than it should have been. And somehow or another, it's done it again. Now it's up on a 441. Maybe my tuner's going out. I'll figure it out and come back to you here in just a minute. Okay, well, the moment I turned the camera off, the tuner started working for me there. I don't know what was going on. Anyway, now I started just checking it a little bit off camera, and these points right here, they bug me, because like a lot of times you'll slide up here and your hand will rub right there and it just catches your hand. So I'm going to knock those off, and I've got a smooth side of this file. This edge here is smooth, so I put that down, and I also, file that corner off, so that this will be really, almost a non-thing. You won't feel it at all when you slide your hand up here now. It's just out of the way more, because this one here's still catching pretty good. So I'm going to file it off too. That's quite a bit better. I've already rounded off the antler saddle. The bridge is standing up pretty straight, but quite honestly, I like them a little bit straighter than that. It's pretty darn straight though, really. It's probably fine. Action-wise, it's holding a pick at the 12th fret. These are basically a 1 millimeter, 1.14 I think millimeter pick. So it's holding that very well right there. One of the things that I've noticed on this mandolin, and I don't know what caused it, but it's got this buffed out spot right here, kind of or I should say an unbuffed spot, just kind of a rubbed place. I don't know what caused that at all. It was that way out of the case when it got here, but I'm going to see if my Semichrome can polish that out a little bit. So we'll take a little bit of the Semichrome polish, give you a close look at that dull area there, and let's see if we can improve that. Just put a little bit of, well, that's more than I needed, but see if this will rub that out. I'm hoping it will. I don't know for sure that it will, but it might. Well, it looks a little better. Might have to do it a couple times. That was so rough there that it might even need a little bit of sanding before I do it, like maybe 22,000 or something. Might have been better, but this usually does it if you just stay with it. The Semichrome is available on my website on the products I use, and I'd appreciate it if you'd buy it there, because I do get a little bit of a kickback. It's very minimal, like something like 3% or something, a very minimal amount, but if enough of you buy it, well, every little bit adds up. Well, that's definitely better. You can probably see it's better. I can still see it here. I don't know if you can still see it on camera, but I think the third application might do it. So let's just do it one more time. And I really do like these blue shop towels for doing this. It really seems to add to the buffing on it. It really does. Some people say, oh, you should use something better than that. Well, honestly, I think these are as good as it gets. I don't think there is anything better. I've tried all kinds of towels and things, and that really looks good there. Now, you can't even see it. I mean, I can sort of tell where it used to be, but it's so good now that no one would really notice it. So let me take a clean rag here and wipe her down real good. Make sure it doesn't leave any polish on there. But I think that worked out really nice. Okay, well, I think we're all ready to go. It plays like a dream now. I mean, it was really awkward to play before. In fact, it plays better than the mandolin I play every day. I can tell you that for sure. I think I played Right On by Bill Monroe in the before. Does play easy, and it would be even easier if my hands didn't ache so bad. I mean, it really does play super easy. You can probably tell that when you're pushing these strings down, they're barely moving. I mean, it's just, there's almost nothing there. They're so easy to press down. So as it gets right there. And since it came all the way from Switzerland, I wanted to make sure I got it just as good as it could be done. The only thing left to do is to wipe all the fingerprints off. I believe we'll loosen the strings a little bit, put it back in the case, and get her on its way. Well, my friends, I hope you enjoyed seeing the very detailed setup of the Loar mandolin from Switzerland. And it's a nice mandolin. It plays so easy now. If he doesn't like it, I honestly wouldn't know how to help him because honestly, it's as good as it gets. Every part of it has been tweaked and it's just as in top shape as it can possibly be, in my opinion. I sure hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, give me a thumbs up. And if you don't like it, I don't care. Go ahead and give me a thumbs down if that turns you on. We'll see you in the next one.